Today's guest is Eenox. Eenox is a platforming god in the game Celeste and the End Is Nigh, as well as completed various incredible feats in the game Undertale, including the Genocide Run, completed entirely no damage, and various bosses done at increased speeds, including the Sans boss fight at 2 times the regular speed, no damage. In Celeste, he was the first person to beat the Golden Strawberry and collect the Moonberry in a single run, and in the End Is Nigh was the first person to complete the game no damage, which resulted in a trophy being added to the game called Iron God, as well as having completed various world record speedruns. In this conversation, we go through the various incredible runs that Eenox has done, as well as the difference between memorization and reaction time when dealing with bosses, the progression after the Celeste Golden Strawberry, moving on to incredibly difficult modded runs, including the infamous Monica D-Sides, as well as how the journey into challenge running the End Is Nigh started before the game was even released, and many, many more topics. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Eenox. Right, Eenox, thanks very much for taking some time out of the day to do this. Hope your day's going well, man. How's it going?
Thank you. No worries. My day's going pretty all right. How about you?
I am doing really well.
Nice.
So I would like to start. We're going to go into mainly 3 different games, but I wanted to start with platformers as a gaming type, and was interested if there's something about platforming games that you really enjoy, or if it's just the particular games that you chose to focus on, or a bit of both.
I think I've been drawn to platformers because, like, in the early days of them, they were like seen as one of the harder game types. Like, I think I like them because they're like some of the purest form of, other than like rhythm games, they're like some of like the purest form of like precision in games. What I've thought about, because I obviously know that mostly when it comes to like no hit deathless stuff, which is like what I'm mostly interested in, people normally think like Soulsborne games or whatever. And that's like, I've never played those myself, so I don't know how to, I wish I could compare those different fields, but they're like, those types of games don't interest me as much because I feel like the precision element really isn't the main thing with those. With platformers, it's really down to like your mechanical skill and like your super nano precision overall. And I like mashing buttons quickly, and especially when speedrunning platformers, you get to like mash the heck out of your keyboard, and but it's like you're also doing it calculated. Like something about that is just really really satisfying to me, and I think that's why I've gravitated towards that.
It sounds like mashing, but each one of those is an actual particular
Yeah.
thing, like a precise press, so to
Yeah.
speak. Let's go to your first experience, or like, what was your first experience with a gaming challenge? Was it straight into doing one yourself, or did you see someone else do something and was like, that seems interesting? What was your first involvement or introduction to gaming challenge runs?
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting story, I think, because I have no idea where I would be if this like one video did not exist. So it started with Undertale. I discovered the game Undertale and was really into the story, and like, I watched a bunch of playthroughs on YouTube, and then I came across no-hit videos of the bosses from Undertale. And of course, spoilers for anyone who hasn't played Undertale. Sans is basically like the hardest, like ultimate boss fight in the game, and I was interested in the Sans no-hit run. I mean, by this point, it had been like a year since the game had been out or something, and like there'd been many videos. But I mean, with millions of views though of no hit Sans. But then there was this one guy in particular. His YouTube channel is No Hit Runs. He was like the first and basically only person to be doing sped up no hits of the fights. Basically, like he would set them off in like main categories. Like he would either do 1.5 speed or 2 times speed for the Undertale bosses. He wouldn't do like really specific rates. I think those make sense. Anyways, so he had a video of no hit Sans 1.5 speed first phase only, and in the description he wrote that he deemed the rest of the fight impossible for no hit at that speed. Like he and something about that, it's really weird because I never thought like so before I started doing challenge games and stuff, I never thought of myself that was as someone who could like achieve something that I would personally be in awe in. Like, because I remember specifically the feeling of watching those no hit videos and being like, dude, there's like no way that I could also do that. Or like I literally had those thoughts, and it seems insane now because it's like doing no hit Sans just like normal speed is like quite, I feel quite entry level when it comes to, normal no-hit runs or something like that. For most people wouldn't take more than 10 hours of like work, which I mean, to some people is a long time because most people don't put that much effort into like a little minute thing in video games. But anyway, getting off track a little bit. So I was like really inspired by that because I thought I would be quite good at Undertale actually, because the gameplay is very much like this Flash game called The World's Hardest Game,
Hmm.
where
Oh, that is nostalgia from
yeah,
school.
that was I played that game when I was like 7 or 8 years old on either Cool Math Games or Addicting Games. I can't remember which website. And I played that game. I swear to God, like I don't even know how many hours on end, like daily. I was like super addicted to that game. I was really bad, like when I was 7 years old. But like this, the procedural, like I mean, just the brute force of my tiny child brain I was able to beat the game. And then by the time I was like 12 years old, I think my low death TV was like, I want to say like 8 or something in the game. But I still to this day have actually never gone back and done a zero death run. I really should at some point, but I do a zero death run of the original. Actually, no, I don't think I can because Flash is like gone or something. Maybe there's probably some version of it.
There'll be a way, I think.
There's probably a way. But anyways, so like I have had a lot of practice. If you know anything about those two games together, like the gameplay of Undertale is like literally the exact same thing. Like you're instead of being a red square, you're a red heart, and you move at basically almost the same movement speed, like in both games, and all you do is just dodge like random things, and it's just up, down, left, right, or the diagonals. And I don't know, I thought I would be pretty good at it. And when I first played Undertale, I noticed that I was like way better than most of like the average Let's Players I was watching. Because like I would watch them and I'm like, dude, how did you not dodge that? Like when I would watch like Jacksepticeye or like whoever I was watching play, I'm like, come on, guys.
World's hardest game, like all that veteran practice came into
Yes.
fold.
No, seriously though, like honestly, it really, really did help. I think give me that natural proclivity, if that's the word. Anyways, so I was inspired by the description of the video because this guy who I looked up to basically said that this was impossible, and I really doubted that. Though I could see where he was coming from. The second phase of the Sans fight is a lot more reaction based because there's attacks where it like quickly does like flashes for like a split second and then it puts you into this like basically there's like mini attacks where it's like it's 0.3 seconds long, but you basically have to press the right button to not get hit and you have to react. And on normal speed you have like plenty of time to react. But I mean, as you increase that speed, the limit becomes how fast you can react to these little mini attacks in the second phase. And the thing is, it's RNG. It draws from a pool. Like the order and what mini attacks come out are drawn from a random pool. And like you can memorize like the attacks, but not the order. You'll never be able to know the order. So you can like get good at dodging them and like processing them faster. That's really all you can improve on. But you can't really improve your reaction time that much for it. At 1.5 speed, I thought it was really hard, but I played like an hour almost every day except for like I took like a week break towards the end, but for like 2 months I did like an hour every day to try and do Know It Sans 1.5. And this is actually where I created my Twitch channel, or it's not where I created my Twitch channel, but it's when I started streaming on my Twitch channel for the first time basically.
So could I just slow
Yeah.
down just one quick sec? So I just want to clarify a second ago. So that phase is Sans has a variety of attacks that he can choose from, and the screen basically like goes black screen, and then
Yeah.
it's one of those attacks, and you have that minute time, as you said, to react and avoid,
Yes.
so you don't get hit in that. Just as a visual for
Yes.
people to think of. And the second thing is, did you go straight? Was the 1.5 immediate? Like, there wasn't even thought of like doing it
Oh,
regularly. It was just
right.
straight for 1.5.
So yeah, no, I did do. Yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. I did do no hits of all of the bosses at normal speed first. I went through and like the whole game and did that, and I think I went straight to Sans. I don't even think I touched Undyne besides like doing normal speed no hit. I think that was later. I did get no hit of every boss at normal speed, which only took me like a few days. I want to say, especially like the non-genocide bosses. Like I think that only took me a couple days, and then the other ones I can't exactly remember the timeline on. But yeah, it was like a month before I started actually going for 1.5 speed that I did know it sans normal. So I don't even there's not a whole lot to say besides I grinded it out daily basically, and I mean wasn't counting the hours, but I would guess somewhere between like 60 to 80. It's kind of a decent range, and I eventually did get know it sans at 1.5 speed. although not before having a choke on the very last attack. Like I had a choke like 2 seconds before the end, actually, an entire month before I ended up doing it, which is something that can happen, especially if you're like an amateur, I guess, when it comes to this stuff. Because like I don't know exactly like how that happens, how you can, I guess it must have just been a massive fluke for the time, and I just got like a really lucky session, and I could have done it so much sooner if I just clutched it out on that one run. That was like, but I think that was a very formative experience, having such a brutal choke and then having to like spend so much extra time after that. Because I mean, that's something that could happen to anyone, like in any one of these challenges. Like you could just choke at the very end, at the very cusp of victory, and then have to spend however many countless hours more just to achieve it. I mean, and especially the harder something gets, it's like the risk of that becomes greater. And it's like that's what I'm most afraid of when I think of tackling challenges, especially when it comes to long form challenges. But don't want to get too ahead of myself. Let me finish talking about Sans. So yeah, I eventually did it, not before the choke, and that was like I was surprisingly okay actually after the big fail. It was like February 12th or something. I think March 12th is when I got it. I haven't checked the dates in a while. It doesn't really matter. But I was so excited when I first got it. And the thing is, I sort of had this like mentality that because I did something so much better than like anyone else had done in Undertale like no hit stuff, that of course I would get some like viewership recognition of some sort. But the thing is, by the time that's not how it works. Just because you do something
No,
amazing, and I mean, as a lot of these people know who are in this, as feel like if they're not like a top Twitch streamer already or something, you don't really. That's not how it works. You don't get recognition equal to how great of a thing you accomplish. Wish it worked like that, but that's not how it is. I came to terms with that pretty quickly, but it was a bit of a surprise. I don't know how long it took my video to get like 1,000 views, but I was like very excited to keep playing Undertale though. And I continued to play Undertale and do no hits of some of the other bosses at. So I did Undyne the Undying, the other genocide boss at 1.5 speed. That was pretty easy actually, because that boss is mainly pattern. There's only a few RNG segments, and one of the RNG segments I actually found. I don't know if I found. I think I looked at someone else's video actually. I wanted to do no hit Undyne at 2x speed, and there were actually people who were laying some of the groundwork. Someone did, I believe, no hit Undyne, or not no hit Undyne. They did like no healing Undyne at 2x speed, and I saw them do this strat on one of the attacks that was giving me a lot of problems, where like they just slowly they just slowly tapped left. Now I mean that's a pretty like basic thing. Like if there's like in some games, if the enemy or whatever is targeting you, like aiming at you, and they're shooting at you rapidly or something, like tapping movement to move slowly is a pretty common tactic when it comes to stuff like that. But it was kind of counterintuitive for the attack that it was. But they applied that same concept, and it made like one of the hardest attacks into like one of the easiest. And so it basically made the fight like totally not free, but it made it way easier. So 2x speed only took like a few hours actually. I, for some reason, was pretty good at that. It's a good time to mention that at this time I didn't know how much I was being limited. Like I buy my computer by how good my computer was. And I know that sounds silly because Undertale is like a very basic, not resource heavy game. But I was experiencing a lot of, and what I care about nowadays is input lag. And I realized especially how much that matters when it comes to like reaction based stuff, and certainly doing no hits of bosses at higher speeds, upwards of 2x speed. Reaction becomes like one of the main factors.
So, could you just describe for someone who might not be aware what input lag
Yeah.
is?
So input lag is how long it takes your input that you do for your, when you press a button, how long it takes for that to like happen on your screen, for like the action to happen on screen. I don't know like what the average input lag on someone on most people's computer is, but I just had a basic PC. What was it? It was like 2017, and I built like, yeah, at the time I had a computer that me and my brother built in 2014, and even then we got like, it was sort of a budget build, like my first PC. We weren't trying to make it amazing, and yeah, I was definitely having, if I had to guess, ballpark like 50 to 60 milliseconds probably of input lag, mostly due to my monitor, maybe because this is really weird, but I got a 144 hertz monitor, and for some reason that I didn't upgrade a single other thing about my computer, and my input delay even on 60 fps capped games for some reason was like way better. I don't know if that's like a common thing or like a normal, I have no idea why that was, but if you get like a better monitor and just like I got a better monitor, and then I got an SSD. I didn't even upgrade like my graphics card or like any of the things you would think you would upgrade. I think if you upgraded your graphics card, that's probably the one thing you should probably upgrade if you're trying to, that and your CPU. Like I would say is probably going to be what lowers your input lag the most, but it's really case specific. And honestly, like if you're trying to have low input lag, I would just like I've had to basically redo. I built an entire new PC basically. As soon as I started caring about input lag, I'm like, okay, I need to like I've changed basically everything about my setup, so you know, from like a few years ago. So I care a lot about input delay because I think it like having that extra lag time when it's a reaction based game, that's basically artificial time added on top of your reaction time. Because you might be reacting at a certain speed and you might actually be reacting fast enough to dodge whatever it is if you had lower input lag, is basically what I'm saying. And that became very relevant in skipping forward in the timeline, but I guess we're going game by game here. I eventually did No Hit Stands at 2 times speed, which would not have been even remotely possible on my old computer. Which in that whole journey was so much worse. That was one of the worst grinds like ever of my life.
I want to focus on just a few things you've said before
Yeah.
we forget them, before going into the 2 times. So seeing just the 1.5. The first thing I want also is just like the visual image you got when you said when you read this guy's description saying that it's impossible and you're reading this. So just it's that meme of the creator going, "Why do I hear boss music at the moment?" So you're like going for it. So two things I wanted to say was an aspect of challenge running with that final boss or final part in a single boss, the final phase. Having that finish, it's such a difficult thing mentally, at least I found as well, and I know other runners have in different games, because as you say, it's not just the fact that run is done, it's the fact that the future attempts time, accumulated time, is you then, or at least immediately, the next few runs you're thinking, this could be over with.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring reference that affects like so many runners and every run pretty much, or whether that be a boss or a DS3 run or Dark Souls run, being the last boss, it affects everything.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess it is a good time to talk about nerves and how much that affect like no hit runs and stuff, and Deathless, whatever. I feel like I'm like one of the most susceptible people to nerves. Like some people, it seems like they don't even get bothered by it. One of the examples of those people is one of my friends, Lenny Gold. He was the first to do Feral Golden Strawberry, and like if you watch his clear video, like he just does not even because I cared so much about this, and it's like he just did the most. He just seems like not emotionless, but like he just does not have. He does not. If you watch like my clear video and his clear video, we're not the same. I don't know how. I just can't describe it. He's just someone who does not get super stressed. I mean, he was breathing heavy a little bit like after he did it, but like he doesn't like at the end of my clears, dude. I'm like screaming in delight because I'm so happy that it's finally over. Because I get really attached to and I'm like really passionate about whatever thing I'm doing. But anyway, so nerves themselves, yeah, I'm very susceptible, and there's really not a strat to like be better about them. There's no mental trick you can use. It affects pretty much everybody, at least to some degree. The only thing I say that you could improve that with is just like experiencing it over and over again. Like at a certain point, if you choke towards the end so many times, it's just gonna feel like nothing anymore. Or like the further you get, the more like if you get further in your respective run more often, it'll take longer for you to get nervous, and maybe it'll creep up slower, but it's just an inevitable factor, and that usually ends up being the final hurdle to overcome in a run. Like you could have really good consistency in practice, and like it seems like you should have it in the bag, but then it's like an actual runs, nerves just creep up every time, and you could get so many good runs in a day, but it just feels like the nerves come so early, and then you have to fight through it, and it's just, I don't want to say it's torture, but in a way it might be, to like force yourself to play through the stressful situations. But the thing is, I feel like I actually like that, or like that's part of what
don't worry, like all challenge runners here are all masochists. We just don't admit it.
Yeah, like no, I think I actually like it. Like that's what I'm like addicted to. Like seriously, it's probably a decent factor. And it's like, well, I guess it's not like that I'm addicted to. It's like the feeling of finally doing it. It's like makes it worth it, or at least
Like accomplishment of it.
yes, the accomplishment, the feeling of accomplishment after doing it is worth it, maybe. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of like how to elaborate.
Has that nerves thing improved as you've done more and more difficult runs, or just more runs in general?
I want to say I really don't think too much. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say because after like because I am someone who's taken like lots of significant break. Well, kind of actually. That I don't take small breaks. I'm someone who I only take like long breaks. Like whenever I decide to take a break, it's like that's when my brain finally shuts off and it takes so long for it to like want to get back on the horse again. Like right now, I feel like I'm at the tail end of a quite a long break myself.
Is a break from a run, or is it just a break overall from streaming? Is it like, do you go to a different run, or just overall?
So it's like once I finish some challenge or like set of challenges, sometimes I will just like feel sort of burnt out and not really have motivation to go and tackle some new hardest challenger because that's generally what I try and do. I don't do a lot of small challenges that are like quite easy. I like want to only do stuff that like really challenges me. So normally I go like immediately for like a new hardest challenge or at least like a new hardest challenge in a particular game. Maybe not my
Go
hardest
big or
challenge
go home
ever.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I that's what like I want to continually improve and like do like greater and greater things. I'm sorry, I think I forgot like what your initial question was.
It's no worries at all. I'm sort of like going from the pieces that you're talking about as well. Because one other thing I wanted to ask was, in terms of because you live stream all these different kind of runs, with the nerves aspects, because something that I found personally when doing these runs is distraction can be obviously a hindrance. Like it can like cost a run every now and again, but also in some weird cases, the like chat interaction or stuff going on or news or anything like that can distract you from what's going on in the run. You sort of on autopilot. Has that helped you in any particular runs, or?
Yeah, so for sure, I feel more comforted actually when I'm like streaming a temp. For something about it, like having like that extra background stuff going on actually like calms me down a little bit because it makes it I don't know exactly why. It just makes like what I'm currently doing right now feel not totally as important. Like it's not the like there's other things happening. So for some reason like that's a little comforting. But at the same time, on like there's another side of distraction and runs where it's like I'll become aware of like how my hands feel or like how my clothes feel on my body, or I'll like go into manual breathing, manual blinking. Like sorry, but like I literally think about this. Like once I start getting nervous, all of those thoughts come into my head every single time. It's like manual breathing, manual blinking. You can feel your body. You feel like you controlling your body. And it's like you become hyper aware of it. And it's like, bro, I just want to play this game. So I have to like somehow focus on not focus on focusing or something. Like you have to do some weird, I don't even know how to do it, but you have to like somehow just focus on the game as much as possible.
Have you picked up like any tricks from like experiencing that, like when you sense it happening, just like, okay, there's a couple of things that I need to like focus on or look at or do to try to reduce this, not perhaps
Yeah.
stop it, but like try and reduce the effect of this?
I just have to think about the strat that like the next set of inputs that I have to do, or just like think about like the queue of inputs that I'm constantly doing. Basically, I have to like because I say focus on the game. What does it actually mean? It's kind of abstract. I mean, the whole thing's pretty abstract. I guess yeah. I just try and focus on the inputs, not the feeling of the inputs, but just the inputs themselves, and like make sure that what I'm doing on screen matches what I want to happen. But other than that, I have literally no advice for that. I don't know how to help it.
No, it's your experience. Then people may take something from it. Like it doesn't have to be like a
Yeah.
direct. This is what you should do. Sometimes someone in a similar position might go, "Oh, that might be something I can
Yeah.
try," or something like that. So it's all good. I was interested because you've talked about individual bosses that you've done and at increased speeds like 1.5, and we'll go into times two in a sec. But you've also done the entire
Yes.
genocide run, which people who might not, well, most people will probably be aware at this point, but Undertale, two endings, the pacifist and the genocide. Genocide being the more difficult one, where you have to pretty much beat every mob in the game and every boss, sort of, because it's really only Undyne and Sans. What did you find? Did you find a difference between running a run like that and just a singular
Yes.
boss.
That, and I think I found like what I actually enjoy more. I I found that I do enjoy the longer form runs that aren't necessarily like, because the things that I was doing before, or like I am trying to maximize the difficulty in like a really short amount of time with the single bosses, right? But then like with the long runs, it's like I'm not doing stuff of that same like precision level or difficulty level, but the fact that it's an hour and a half and I have to not make a single mistake is it changes the game basically entirely, because and it changes how nerves work as well, because it's like, okay, well, you can't, because normally I'm doing a 5 minute boss fight and then I get nervous like 2.5 3 minutes in, but in this it's like 20 minutes can pass and it's like I'm not even close to the end, so like what's the point in being nervous? It's like you're not nervous, but you just have like an underlying sense of like it's like better actually, because you feel like focused after a while, like after like a half hour you feel focused, but you're not like super pressured because there's so much more to go. I enjoyed doing No Hit Genocide quite a bit. It actually, I mean, it's not super hard in my opinion, but by that point I was extremely consistent at the Sans boss fight. I mean, especially at normal speed, I was able to like crank out no hit like 5 times in a row, like no joke.
Because this was post 1.5 speed, wasn't it?
Right, right. So like I'd already mastered. Well, at this point, I had mastered Sans at 1.5 speed and 2 times speed. Not mastered, I guess, but I'd beaten them no hit both. So both of those boss fights are pretty trivial. Honestly, it was just not getting hit by the mobs in the core, because some of those combos that you can get with the mobs in the core are quite challenging. Like Night Magic is just the big example. Both of those attacks, like both of their attacks at the same time, are like really awkward. And the thing is, like, you can't really practice that as easily as you can practice the bosses, because it's like random what enemies come up and they have like different attacks they can draw from. It's harder to, but their attacks are easier.
So a couple of ones I want to talk about. So you've also we talked about Sans, Undyne. Another couple you've done from the other ending. It would be Omega Flowey and
Yeah.
Asriel. However you pronounce that, I'm still not
No, you
entirely
pronounced
sure.
it right.
Especially with the Flowey one, my interest was because we talked earlier about reaction time, and this one is a really big example. Because I think with Sans, it's obviously in that second phase as you described, reaction time comes in a lot more. But before that, and to an extent later on, memory is a big factor and have
Yeah.
it in that muscle memory. Flowey has that order, but it's also so quick that reaction time seems to, at least to me, it appeared to be a bit much bigger factor. So I was just wondering, do you separate them as that, or does it all just flow together for you when you're doing these runs?
So actually, counterintuitively, I think Flowey is even more memorization than Sans.
Okay.
Surprisingly, because I have a friend, Lexi, who is like far and away the world's greatest like Flowey player, like in Undertale. She has grinded literally thousands of hours on Omega Flowey and has done the final phase at 2 times, I think even at 2.2 times speed no hit, which is like unfathomable, like how you can do that. So like I think reaction time actually is less of a, I mean, like, at that point obviously you do have to react way fast, but the thing about Flowey is actually just positioning and like anticipating what the next attack coming up could be, and like how you would dodge them if that is the case. It's like the thing about it is the transition between attacks. You need to not be caught in a bad spot, and you need to know like what the danger zones are, because there's danger zones where like attacks can come out and you'll unavoidably get hit basically. But which is why in the past people thought that Omega Flowey was like RNG. Like if you look back at, I want to say was it the 2018 or something Undertale run at AGDQ, on the couch when the Mega Flowey boss fight came out, one of the guys on the couch was saying how like there's only like a 4% chance or something like that any given seed of Flowey is dodgeable, which is just 100% not the case. That is not how it works. And the thing is, like, you have to like work against, and this is, I actually like this about bosses though, where it's like when a boss is designed like that, where like you can get screwed over, but like and just get hit unavoidably, but it was only unavoidable because you made a wrong like decision beforehand. So like there's more, if you know everything and like you like how to predict everything properly, you will never be caught in a situation like that basically, and you'll always be able to dodge it.
So it's like the onus is always on you to be like better than the boss, quotations,
Yes.
like that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
which is why it's really interesting. I really like that boss fight. Really well designed. Like surprisingly, because like it's meant to be like a joke almost. Like you're not actually supposed to fight it, but it's actually quite well designed for if you're trying to do no hit, in my opinion. At the time, it's crazy to think about. Like at the time, I actually was the third person to do no hit Flowey, but now like I feel like so many people have done that. But a lot of people were like turned off from it because they think it's like an RNG fest, which is actually not. And then Asriel is an RNG fest, basically.
Okay.
Like in the truest sense of the word. And like people wouldn't really, and that's counterintuitive as well. People wouldn't expect that, but only because people like lack critical information. So, I mean, it depends on what you're defining as the Asriel boss fight. In the past, people just thought, like, didn't even like consider the other phases of the Asriel boss fight. They just thought of like phase 1 Asriel, that is the Asriel boss fight. But nowadays, I, at least personally, I don't hold that opinion. So Asriel has a second phase, you know, if you played the game, or if anyone else listening has played the game, where he becomes like figurehead thing with like big rainbow wings, and then he shoots missiles at you. And the trajectory of the missiles is like just for some reason really awkward to like track. Like it seems very odd, and it's just really difficult to dodge. But it's doable. Like at first, like, he shoots a barrage. There's I think four separate barrages, or not barrages, but I mean like there's four individual attacks where I would call it the medium speed missiles or like the medium density. You dodge those, and then the next attack is like the complete BS attack. Worst thing ever. Bane of my existence. He does this thing that's not meant to be dodged. He shoots like dozens upon dozens of missiles, like freaking 20 missiles in like per second for like 3 seconds, and then you have to dodge this complete mess of bullets. Most of the time, it is not possible to dodge that attack, I want to say, at least humanly. But so what I wanted to do, I had the idea of actually doing the entire Asriel boss fight no hit, like doing phase 1, but then also adding on phase 2. And phase 2 at this point, as far as I had known, only been no hit once before ever. Like the entirety of phase 2 had only been no hit one time. The thing that was really standing in the way of like doing this, I feel like, is the fact that, well, in order to fight Asriel normally at all, there's no like with Asgore or most of the other boss fights, there's not just a save point right before the boss fight. Well, technically there is, but for Asriel, you have to go through basically like a 3-minute cutscene. Even if you're skipping text, it takes like 2 minutes to like just attempt phase 1 of the boss fight. So imagine if you're trying to get good at phase 2, let alone that final attack, that final BS attack. There, you'd have like one attempt for every 7 minutes or something at best. That's just not; those are not conditions to improve at something. Like that is just not worth it at that point. So I looked into, is there a way that you can actually like do some sort of save state in Undertale? Like I would imagine there probably is. And I think I saw an Undertale speedrunner or something doing like some sort of save state thing, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder. But it was like in the overworld, not like for an actual like boss fight. But I was wondering like, is there actually a way to practice the boss fights? Like, because I'd never done that before. Before, all I did was I just played through the boss over and over again repeatedly, which is not a very good way of improving, but that is what I had. But this time, like, in order to do this, I definitely needed save states. There was no way it was possible without it. So, long story short, there actually was a way, and I eventually was able to use a save state tool, not only to start like phase 1 Asriel, skipping the cutscene, but it turns out that I was able to create a save state of sorts at the start of phase 2 and at the start of the final attack as well, which was huge. So basically, I was able to. What made it the only thing that made this possible was that I could practice that final attack where it was like the super dense missiles. I was able to do like an attempt every like 10 seconds, or like basically immediately back to back. And my rough estimate of how consistent that attack is to dodge, you know, in ideal conditions, like if you're, you know, taking advantage of every opportunity, maybe 3% of the time that attack is dodgeable.
So that's how out of every 100 attempts, that'd be 3 you're all good.
Yeah.
And that's only if you have the reaction speed to do it as
Yeah.
well.
and you have to get literally the entire boss fight before that. Phase 1 is pretty simple, I want to say. There's one attack actually at the end of phase, or like the transition between phase 1 and phase 2, where it's like these it's basically like wind physics of sorts on your soul, where you're being sucked into the center point of the screen, and there's a bunch of like boxes collapsing on you, and it's complete RNG, like where and how many like boxes are like the direction they're coming from. I'm pretty sure that's dodgeable every time. Some people think that's like BS. I was able to dodge that like 100% of the time towards the end. But surprisingly, it wasn't super painful. It was mostly painless in terms of I got pretty lucky with the RNG. I think I only needed to make it to the final attack maybe like 12 to 15 times, which isn't terrible. But I would not recommend ever doing something as stupid as like it's a really dumb challenge. The only reason I wanted to do this was because it was the final boss in Undertale that hadn't been like officially no hit, basically. Like no one had no hit the entire boss fight. So I wanted to do that.
Which is a shame as well, because I think Asriel's got like, for a no hit run, like the best music. It's so like
I know.
fitting.
Yeah, it's a really cool boss fight, and like one of my favorite songs, like from the soundtrack. And it's just pretty epic. But like because of that ending, no one has like wanted to do that, and because it's so inconvenient to restart the boss fight. I mean, a lot of people haven't even done normal Asriel phase 1 no hit. I didn't for a really long time, actually. I mean, I think until I started practicing for full fight Asriel no hit, I don't think I had no hit phase 1 before, because I just didn't feel like going through the cutscene to get one attempt. But then once I got the save state tool, then I'm like, okay, well now like it was way easier. And actually, I said it was mostly painless, and I guess that's true. But I did have like one of the worst chokes I've ever had in gaming, where I got hit after I made it past like the hardest RNG attack. Basically, I've been calling it the final attack. Technically, it's not actually the final attack. There basically Asriel does like a half-assed like slow missile attack where he only shoots like 6 or something, and it's like and they're so spaced out, so spread out. Like I had like never gotten hit on this attack before, but the first time I made it to that attack no hit, I actually ended up getting hit, and I was like the saltiest I've ever been. Like it was really. But the thing is, that was the same session that I actually got the real no hit on, which is amazing, because I feel like the majority of people would have probably wanted to just stop playing right there, and like, because that's so bad. But the thing about me is like, I don't know, like getting mad for some reason, like I've never really had a huge control of my tilt. I've never been like a huge tilter in general, I want to say. I can get pretty bad though at times, but in specific instances. But this was like the worst ever, the like most angry I've ever felt, playing a game. But for some reason, I like the stubbornness overrides everything, and I played for like another hour and a half, I don't even know, and I'm very glad I did so, because I was able to actually do it. But the thing is, I don't think that's recommended behavior as well. Nowadays, I think I would actually have probably just taken a break after that. And that's something I think I should disclaim, is that my past like habits with challenge gaming, I feel like some of them were not healthy, or at least some of them, maybe a lot of them. Because in the past, I would just like force myself to just keep playing because I wanted to be better. And I'm talking like on a session, like on the scope of a single session, play for like more hours than like maybe I actually wanted to, thinking that it would benefit. And I mean, thing is, it actually does somewhat benefit you to a certain degree. If you play for like 7 hours, I don't think all of that time is totally worthwhile. I feel like 5 hours, I feel like, is my absolute limit of like useful practice or attempts that I could probably get in on anything.
So if something like that was happening, you had 5 hours available to stream at hour 3, a challenge isn't going well, what would be would it be just an early stream, or would it be let's do something else? What would be the current?
Yeah, got it. So the current plan would probably be switch games, or or like, instead of doing attempts, because usually it's attempts that are really gonna get me like that. Like practice, I don't see why it would, like practice wouldn't get me frustrated. most of the time. But practice could I guess get boring. Like I feel like my motivation levels have been lower recently, so it's been harder for me to like grind out those long sessions. And I feel like that's somewhat due. I feel like I'm on like a super burnout, like over the years of just playing for like 5 hours a day, like grinding all the challenges that I was doing. I feel like wasn't the best. So now like after a couple hours of practice, I'm like, damn, I'm bored. I really don't want to be doing this. And so I've just started listening to myself and just being like, you know what? If you don't like, if you really, really would rather do something else than just do the other thing. Because normally I have something in mind. It's like, if I'm like, I'm never just like bored, but don't have anything in mind of like what I want to do. So normally I'll just like boot up another game. I've been enjoying Fall Guys actually on the side for a long time. I have like almost 400 hours in that game. And it's like, it's not the most skilled game in the world. It's pretty like basic, silly game, but I take it kind of seriously, and I think it's pretty fun. And that's kind of rare for me to find a game that I just like find fun, because most of the time that I play games, it's to improve or like improve skill or get better or something like that. That's like my main reason for playing games.
Yeah, there can be a big difference, especially in this like niche that we're all part of. It's on a video game which has its own like thoughts of, but it's you're not actually sort of playing a game. You're completing a challenge which is on a
Yeah.
game. Which that sort of separation makes a huge difference when you're approaching these.
Yeah.
Like there can be a difference between just playing through a difficult game and approaching this challenge that you want to complete in a game. It does make a big difference. I think now is a good time to move on to the next one, which would be a game called The End Is Nigh. Now, this is a game I was not as familiar with as the other two games, Undertale or Celeste, which we'll go to afterwards. And for a bit of a visual for people, The End Is Nigh is like a combination, is very similar to Super Meat Boy, which is because it was made a sequel or it was made after Super Meat Boy by one of the same game developers, where you're like a black smudge instead of the Super Meat Boy and has like the grabbing mechanics of Celeste. So just a bit visual there. What was it about this game that drew you in, as you did quite a lot with this game?
Yeah.
And this was post Undertale as well, I
It
believe.
was. So yeah, just to briefly finish, like to close the Undertale thing. I did the Undertale runs from like March of 2017 to I think June 2017. I did like 5 or 6 challenges, and then I caught wind of a game, an upcoming game called The End Is Nigh. Now I've always been a fan of Edmund McMillen. He made The Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy, and like many other games. But like The Binding of Isaac actually used to be like my favorite game ever. Can like I want to say from like 2012 to like 2016, it was like my favorite game of all time. And I slowly like lost interest in it, but I mean I still like the charm of Edmund games. And I really enjoyed Super Meat Boy as well. I played that on my 360 for I don't even know how many hours, so like my Xbox 360. Not knowing how bad of an experience that was playing playing a precision platformer on a big TV on my console. The input lag, I would puke probably today trying to do that. But I thought it was the best thing ever when I was 12. So The End Is Nigh was another precision platformer made by Edmund McMillen. And because it was made by Edmunds, and especially because it was a new platformer, and they were like really selling it as like being like a brutally difficult thing, I was like so sold, because at this point I was drinking the challenge, like the challenge gaming juice.
You just like,
And
bring it on. Like,
yeah, I was so hungry for like new thing, and like especially a new game. I was excited because I thought, well, maybe if I achieve some insane challenges in a new game, maybe that'll get me recognition or something. And it's not like that's all I was ever doing it for. Like I did enjoy it for itself, but like at this time I was still somewhat, I guess, chasing recognition for what I was doing. Like I don't know, I feel like I've only won once I'm like recognized on the internet for like doing these things. That used to be like the mindset. Now I wouldn't say that's like the greatest mindset to have, but I mean whatever, I grew out of that. I want to say I got sidetracked. Okay, yeah, The End Is Nigh.
I think there is. I just want to go on that for a quick sec, because I think that is a big thing, especially in the modern day, because there's like we're in the age of social media
Yeah.
influencers and big gamers and gamers in films and all this and that. So there is a huge aspect of that nowadays, and there's so many stuff that goes on especially like YouTube, where it's all down to the algorithm. Like these
Yeah.
amazing feats that are on YouTube. Like you've got the genocide, the full genocide run, which incredible. There's I know a few people have done it now, but Monica, Celeste Runner, they did all the B-sides in a row. Deathless, which is another incredible feat, but has I believe a few thousand views. I might be wrong at the current moment. And then another person who I know, Hollow Knight, has done Hollow Knight, All Bindings, Pantheons, which is another incredible like feat. And all these, it's a very strange thing to do with social media, that these certain videos can be showed, and certain videos that are, as we like view them as being really incredible, being difficult, don't get views. And I think at any level, because of the way things are now, it can be, it is always going to be a focus. Just like we do these for fun, or at least like some people do, like personal challenge, but there is going to be a thing of we upload them, so it's like I
Yeah.
hope people can see them. So I just wanted to say that I think it's an everyone thing. It's like everyone does it. It might not be people's first focus, but I think there's always like going to be, I would like people to see this kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't even, I would say there's nothing wrong with wanting that at all. Like even like still today, like I still like that. I would still like people to see it, and like the more people, the better, I guess. But it's not like a main focus.
So sorry, End Is Nigh.
Yeah. So it's really weird that I got so into the game. I could not have predicted like how into the game I would have gotten. I basically like my a name I want to say became like synonymous with the game, at least for a lot of people in the community. Like it's really, at least for a long time. The game, and I feel like I can say that because the game didn't really get that popular actually. Because you said you haven't you weren't super familiar with it, even though like the Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy, super popular games. But then the more recent, The End Is Nigh, for some reason like fell under the radar, and that was, I do know why, or at least generally why that was. The game wasn't really marketed or advertised at all. Really, they just made like a couple teaser trailers and called it that. And reason for that was because kind of the concept of the game, just briefly, was it was kind of like a personification of Edmund's like struggle with game development, and like I guess with his career at the time and his life. I don't know exactly how it's symbolized, like he's never explained it, but like we do know that much, that like that's what the game was supposed to be. So with that in mind, it's like he just didn't really care about, you know, the exposure of the game as much, but just the creating it was a good experience for him, he says. And he says it's like it was his favorite work that he's ever created, which is also insane because I think it's so underrated. I think it's my favorite platformer. I wouldn't say it's the best platformer. Like I don't think it's the best platform I've ever played, but it is my favorites.
So you said you became like synonymous. Could you talk about the achievements
Yeah.
that I'll just leave it at that about, because you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah. Do I just mention that first? I feel like if I start going on the history, I'm just gonna like ramble. No, I'll explain a little bit first. I had always wanted to do the game Deathless, like right from even before it came out, because so the game was made by Edmund McMillan as well as Tyler Glale. Tyler was the programmer basically, and Edmund was like the main lead designer and like artist for the game. Tyler tweeted some weeks before the game came out that if anyone streamed themselves beating the entire game Deathless, that they would add a special achievement for that. And I was really excited about that. And and not a whole lot of people saw that tweet, and like not a whole lot of people would be excited by that, I think. But this calls back to, somewhat calls back to like how I got started in the first place with, you know, Sans 1.5, like sort of being challenge, like the challenge is being put out there by way of like, well, this time it's the developer like literally like,
Calling for it.
yeah. And then in the past it was like the guy saying that, like the guy who I thought was like so good was saying that it was impossible. For that, for something about that like really gets me motivated. And I knew that like from the beginning, like I eventually wanted to do that, but it took a lot longer than I would have expected. And I guess there was a little bit of new inspiration that I got in the End Is Nigh as well. Because like after Undertale, I mean, I wasn't like a whole fortified challenge gamer. At that point, I'm just like, oh, I did Undertale challenges. You know, that was the only thing I'd ever done challenges in. But I mean, I knew I wanted to do all achievements in the End Is Nigh. I knew there were gonna be like Deathless achievements, but I I didn't know how hard the game was going to be or anything really. And I had like almost no experience really playing platformers besides, like I said, playing Super Meat Boy on my Xbox 360. So like a week before the game came out, I bought Super Meat Boy on the PC and I played it for like 50 hours on PC. And I was actually able to do like, I was able to progress pretty quickly. I didn't care about the bandages, but I mean, I did all A plus, I did an A plus of all the levels, like including Dark World in like, I think 8 hours or something. And then I played like 52 hours or something. And I was able to do all of the world's Deathless up to Dark Rapture. I didn't actually get Dark Rapture done, but all I had was Dark Rapture, Light World Cotton Alley, and Dark World Cotton Alley. That was all I had left. And that was all with Meat Boy only, because most of the time people use like different characters to like do the different worlds Deathless, or do different levels Deathless in each respective world. But I was doing it all with Meat Boy. So I just like wanted to get like acclimated with platformers again. But the thing is, I was playing that with controller. But then when the End Is Nigh came out, the controls are actually really simple. It's just left, right, jump, and fast fall, I guess. But most people on their first playthrough don't use fast fall a whole lot in the game. But fast falling is actually such a like it's the mechanic that really makes the game. Like if fast falling was not a mechanic in the End Is Nigh, I think it would be so much worse of a game. But it adds a lot of, I guess, a dynamic element in play. Like there's a lot of, it's hard to explain without like if you
Well,
haven't
imagine.
gone through it before.
Well, imagine if it's similar to Celeste, because Celeste you can do quick falls as well,
True.
and it just changes the timings of things so much that it can influence certain parts
Yeah,
in terms of things.
and Celeste has more advanced tech that doesn't really get used in like your casual playthrough because you don't know they exist basically. And fast falling, I guess, is like a smaller version of like the same thing where it's like I would say fast falling is a bit more of advanced tech. The only thing you really use fast fall for, like mainly, is to ledge grab or to automatically ledge grab. So when you walk off a platform, if you're holding down, which is fast fall, you'll automatically grab onto, the corner, like the top corner of that platform. And if you hold forward and then do a jump while on the ledge of a platform, you'll do like this long, fast lateral jump with a very low arc. So I get, yeah, to explain briefly like the mechanics of the End Is Nigh. You have those ledge jumps, and then you have like your normal jumps, and then obviously you can fast fall in midair. That's basically, and you can grab onto ledges like manually as well. If you just like jumped to them. But there's not a lot of mechanics like to the End Is Nigh. It's a very, very basic platformer. Really, all the character and like intrigue from it comes from like the obstacles that each world like, or the unique obstacles that each world has.
It's so difficult to explain because, like I said, I've only just done a brief view through it when doing research for this, but it is very simple in movement mechanics and in some regard the obstacles, but that doesn't signify like there's a difference between like basic or simple and hard or easy.
Yeah.
Like there is so much going on in the game that even with, as you might describe, simple controls, it is a very difficult stuff because of how precise the platforming is and how much that is going on in terms of projectiles, spikes, mobs. It is a very difficult game from what I looked into.
So the game is also split into like two different parts, the past and the future, similar to Super Meat Boy with the light world and the dark world. The past is like the main overworld, that's where the collectibles are, and then the future, which is basically like the dark world, is the harder version of select areas from the past. So it's like a rework buff of a decent amount of the areas in the past. Not all of them, but some of them. So they're like themed to be like darker, grungier, and just like more pointy, I guess. Like there's just a lot more spikes and a lot more obstacles in the dark world, or in the future rather, and it's a lot harder. And the mechanic of the game, the whole like the gimmick of the future is that the game has collectible tumors. Those are like, and there's 450, there's a count of 450 of them in the game, and those become your lives in the future. So the thing is, if you, and this is a controversial mechanic in the game, because like if you just wanted to play through and beat the game and you didn't collect any of them, and then say you got past, you got through the past and then got to the future, and it's like, oh great, I have 3 lives to beat the harder version of this world. Like that, like that's not a way to play. So you're like forced to go back. But it wasn't a problem for me because I was already trying to be a completionist. So I got to the future with all 450 lives in stock, I was ready to go. But the thing is, so you know what I said about the auto ledge grab mechanic, where like you hold down, you walk off a ledge, and you automatically grab it. In my first playthrough, I actually did not know that was a thing. I would literally walk off the platform and then walk backwards, or not walk backwards, but move backwards in midair to like catch the. It was so much harder. Like it was so stupid. Also, I thought like I can't believe I thought that was a real mechanic, and I didn't even hate the game for that. Like I would have accepted that if that is how the game worked. But I did all but 100% the game before someone told me, because I was hanging out in the Discord, and like I was saying, yeah, I really have problems with like this one part, and they're like, wait a second, do you not know you can do this? And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in Hollow Knight, because there's in Hollow Knight there's ways to cast spells
Quick
and
cast.
quick cast. I didn't find out until after 112%, after I'd done
Oh no.
Pantheon's Damageless, Gordon Bennett,
Oh god.
using the focus button on all of it. And the only reason I found out, well, I sort of found out because I accidentally pressed it, but I mainly found out because I was trying to do fireball skip when pressing for the no damage run, and I was like, I cannot get this. Like, I don't get how people are doing this so easy. And someone like sent me this big video, like, or the video, and the inflated the controller, the controller configurations, and I was like, wait a sec. Quick cast. Yes, that was a moment.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that it's like that much harder to time, because the way that, you know, to cast spells with the focus button, it casts on release, whereas with a quick cast, it casts on the press, and it's way easier to time something with the press than a release. Releasing is not very consistent. A release timing is not very consistent, which is a problem in platformers, or that is played upon. Releases are like tight releases are difficult to do.
Yeah, sorry, that just distracted, got way into Hollow Knight. But World's First on Deathless 80%, which then brought in the achievement Iron Guard, which they fulfilled their promise, yes, and put it in as achievement. How then did you move into speedrunning?
Yeah, so like, yeah, it took me a really long time to eventually, basically after I did 100% achievements in the game, I took a decent break from the game. Actually, no, I didn't. What am I saying? I actually played, I'm just going to briefly say this. I did like 400 hours of custom mods, basically, and it's surprising that so much was made. It's a small community, but like people kept making stuff basically only for me to play, because there's like nobody else who was like doing that. So like that's kind of why I became like the main person in the community. It was like I was like the only person who was actually like pushing like the skill direction of the game like at all, because it was just such a small game, or it turned out to be such a small game. So I did a bunch of custom mod or custom level playing, and then eventually in the summer of 2018, which is a year after the game came out, I finally cracked down and did Deathless Any Percent. And like you said, the achievement Iron God got added, which was the Deathless Any Percent achievement, and I was able to get it. I didn't have to redo it to get the achievement. Luckily, I just had to reload the save, and then or I had to create a backup and then run through the last world again. Luckily, I didn't actually have to use the backup, or because I was actually afraid of that like not working. But
I was gonna say, trophy hunters across the world must have been cursing your name when that was added.
Yeah, no, seriously, people were upset. I guess that's a small thing to talk about. Like I did receive my very own like death threat in the comments of my video for
Oh my god.
like pretty gruesome.
I shouldn't laugh.
No,
But
like obviously
internet stuff.
it's like some 13-year-old who like doesn't know what they're talking about or doesn't know what they're saying. But like, so yeah, eventually I sort of wanted to speedrun the game like for a while, but I wasn't as dead set on that as I was on, you know, the Deathless Any Percent. But finally Deathless Any Percent had been done. I didn't really care about doing any sort of grander Deathless challenge in the game at that time, because the only other options for categories were all collectibles Deathless, or, you know, 152%. And 152% is basically just like max percent Deathless, where it's like small tangent. There are things in the game, or collectibles in the game, called cartridges. And at the start of the game at Ash's home, there's like a little TV game station that he has. And you basically go and play the whatever cartridges you collect become playable on the TV, and it basically becomes like a retro, like very very simple like 8-bit pixel version of the game, where it's like simpler design of the levels, but all the levels are like tighter, harder. There's like there's segmented into 3 different types, well maybe 4 different types, I guess. There's like the normal cartridges, which contain rings or collectible rings. There's the iron cartridges, which are cartridges where you have 1 life to complete. If you die, you get sent back to level 1. And then there's the glitch cartridges where you have infinite lives to complete. The glitch cartridges are, and the normal cartridges with the rings are 10 levels each. The iron carts vary from like 6 to 8 levels. And the iron carts have the easiest platforming, as they are, forced deathless clears. Like, that's, you can only make it so hard if it's going to be like a 1 life clear thing. For the normal carts, they're a little bit harder, especially if you go and try and get the rings. The rings are, and just like the tumors, are set sort of out of the way and in a risky position where, like, there's some, it's like you have to do some awkward input or like tight timing or something to obtain it. And then the glitch cartridges, like I said, there's no collectibles, they're infinite lives. They just contain the hardest like platforming in the game. Like, they're basically like I Want to Be the Guy fan games, almost. Like, not really, like they're like an easy I Want to Be the Guy like Needle fan game, if you're familiar, which is like, that is like the purest type of like precision platforming I can think of. I really like the glitch carts for that. Like, really like the difficulty that they bring. But anyways, 152% is doing the entire game and getting all collectibles deathless in the overworld, and then also doing deathless on all of the cartridges, not while also including you have to get all of the rings in the normal carts as well, which is normally something you don't have to also do. You don't have to do deathless alongside collecting the rings normally, because there's no achievement for that. But if you were to do 152%, which is max percent, you would have to do that. So basically that's out of the question. After I did any percent, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to do anything great, because like it's such a step up. Because I mean, then I'd have to do all collectibles, and that's just like insane, because it's already like a 40-minute run, like to do just the normal any percent deathless. It would be, like I said, like hour and a half plus to do all collectibles. So eventually I moved on to speedrunning, not after taking a decent break from the game, but I did sort of at least practice speedrunning a little bit. I was on again, off again, on again, off again. And my only goal was to beat the current world record. At the time, I think it was a 31:58. And at this point, we were not using in-game time. We were using the auto splitter in-game time, which included pausing. It included everything but level loading, which was pretty good. But there were some problems with that eventually, and we had to switch to just using the file time, in-game time, for timing in speedrunning. But yeah, I eventually did get into it, and I wasn't a speedrunner at all before this. And now, it's even more clear that speedrunning isn't my focus. But it is distinctly different from doing like a what I call perfection challenge, basically. Because like no hit, deathless, whatever. Like
One that is like a definite,
yeah,
this has been completed,
yes,
as opposed to a forever improvement kind of thing like speedrunning.
exactly. Like speedrunning never ends, whereas there's a finite end to the perfection challenges. It's like once you've done the run, you've done the run. There's really no point in doing it again, and you can like move on. And I like that about it, because that makes the feeling of actually completing it, in my opinion, like better than speedrunning most of the time. Because like my experience with speedrunning was I beat the world record and I was sort of happy, but like, so I'm very critical on myself, as I think a lot of people who like speedrun become, or at least already are. And so like after I got the world record, I'm like, damn, like it only took me like a couple weeks of like practicing and attempts to beat the record. I mean, at this point, I already was really good at the game. I just didn't know or practice the speedrun strats. So for me, I was able to like pick up the hardest strats available like right away. I mean, I wasn't consistent at them right away, but I mean, it wasn't out of my league. Like, I don't think really anything would have been.
You already had like a level of game skill in order to, it wasn't a huge reach
Yeah,
to then add those things afterwards.
exactly. I can't imagine trying to accomplish what I did like right away, like right after getting all achievements in the game, because at that point I would still, even after getting 152% the first time, I still feel like you're a total baby in the game. Like your skill, like you still have so much to learn when it comes to controlling Ash, the character. Like to having like the fine control is, for such a simple game, it's like there's a lot of like minute things to improve upon. But yeah, so I found that after most of my PBs, I really wasn't satisfied. Like I did not get that sense of elation after getting a PB, like most of the time, unless it was like a really big jump. And like I didn't, for me to like be satisfied with the PB, I probably would have to have either one major error only in the early game, or like a few minor errors in the in the early and middle game, and then I'd have to completely ace the ending basically. Because I hate when I lose like 5 seconds in the last couple, segments. Like that hurts the most because you're like, damn, like I really could have just clutched that out, but I didn't, and so now it's worse. I found speedrunning made me more upset overall. Like, not that I hate it. Like, I think I could definitely speedrun games, but like, that's just the truth of the matter for me. I just wasn't as satisfied, and it's like, when does it end, basically? And luckily for The End Is Nigh, there was a pretty obvious goal, and that was sub 30. Like I said, the record when I started grinding was 31:58, I think. And it didn't take me very long to beat that. And the thing is, people thought that was like such a next level time when it was achieved. Because it was achieved, I think it was achieved like, I want to say mid 2018 or something, or like early to mid 2018, by Ultramarlin, who is actually, little history fact, he, ended up becoming the world record holder and getting of Celeste any percent. And I think was the first to get a sub 27. I think not 100%, but I think he was. Yeah, I think he broke the sub 27 barrier in Celeste any percent, which is like a much greater achievement than his sub 32 in The End Is Nigh by a little bit.
Is that just because of the scale of the game? That is, I mean, I think like any game can be like a serious improvement. Although I guess with Celeste it might be a bit more complex mechanics, movement wise. But
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, the things. I mean, the Celeste like inputs per second, and just the average level of precision that like you have to do with those inputs per second is ridiculous. Nowhere close to The End Is Nigh. The End Is Nigh is like simple, methodical, but it's like the End Is Nigh is pretty much just about dying, and that's kind of what I found out. Even in speedrunning, dying at all is going to be worse than playing it a little safe and going a little bit slower. That being said, I never like played slow on purpose. I always tried to like, it's fun to try and push your movement to its limit, really, and like try and it's just it's so satisfying. Like I like in a deathless setting, like where I'm trying to play, as safe as possible, I'll never get the feeling of like get that speedrunning feeling. I'm talking about the positive of speedrunning now, I guess. Where it's like it's so satisfying to do the inputs and do like the series of inputs. It's basically like a rhythm game. You're just like, it's just like really scratches an itch in the brain. It's very nice. But then it's equally as, and oppositely as devastating when you mess up finally and make a mistake in the speedrun. It's like it just like it's like shatters your happiness for the moment, I guess. I can't think of a better way to put it, but it hurts a lot more, I feel like, to mess up, to like have a minor mistake in a speed run hurts more than like having a mess, like just an average mess up in like or a death or run loss in a deathless run, which it made it so easy to get frustrated in speedrunning, because like I make one mistake but then I have to keep playing because it's like, well, I mean, it's not over, but I mean, like I was always chasing like the perfect speed run, which I knew it would never happen, because getting the perfect speed run is like so much exponentially harder than getting, just a normal deathless run, obviously, because you're doing like, way harder strats, as like way more precise things without dying, whereas like in deathless you're just playing as safe as possible.
it's super interesting that kind of thought that of people who like don't challenge run, the fact that it might be confusing that a mistake in a speed run is more frustrating than a mistake in deathless, because a deathless, that means the run's over, but in speedrun it can be saved. And I'm not quite sure, I'd like to hear your thoughts on why I think that is, but a thought that I've had previously thinking about it is that you can have a set of events prior to that mistake that have gone perfectly. Like you might have done the first half of the game
Yeah.
really, really well, and that one mistake has cost that side of it. So it's not just that one individual mistake, because you're not sure if you can do that again, that set of events again soon, as opposed to in Deathless, where normally you've got a sense of consistency up to a certain point, so you're more confident about getting back to that point as opposed to speedrun. That's the sort of thought I've had on it when thinking about it, but I just thought your thoughts on the
Yeah,
difference.
no, okay. Your explanation, you're 100% right. That is definitely what it is that like you'll have a really good, like I said, you'll have like the perfect first half and you're like, "Oh my god, this is insane." And then you'll just have some silly mistake that costs you like 3 seconds and you're like, "I could have like tried so less hard. Like I could have, if I didn't make this one mistake, I could have gotten here like with way less effort and have be here at the same time." So it's like, and it is that like that no, that not knowing of like, will I ever be able to achieve that again? Will I ever have another shot at like that pace ever again? It's like that gamble with your time is really, I think, what where the nerves come from, and like what like literally just like part of being a human being that just cannot be avoided and cannot be subverted. Having like it is just the gamble of your time. Eventually I believe it will be done, but it's like I could waste, dozens more hours if I mess up now. Like, in those final moments of a run, you're like, if I mess up now, it's like I can't even, well, actually in the final moments of a run you can't even, I feel you can't even like fathom messing up at that point. Like you can't even like comprehend what that would mean. But I guess,
And that's why it hit. That's why it hits all the more when it
yeah,
happens.
it really does, because you're like, oh my god, wait. Because like you realize what it actually means, and that's, you have to keep playing, and it's like, will I ever be able to match that again? How long will that take? It's unknown. You have no idea. It could be the next attempt. It could be the longest dry spell of your attempt history, and that's the thing that's scary. Like the not knowing how long is what causes so much stress. Because if you knew, obviously, then there would be no stress. But then it would be really boring, obviously.
I want to move on to Celeste in a sec, unless there's anything else you want to say about End Is Nigh.
Okay. Yeah, like just to finish End Is Nigh real quick. Like there's like not a whole lot I can really say about it. I mean I've put the most amount of hours. Well, actually at this point I have like pretty similar amount of hours in Celeste and the End Is Nigh. But I eventually did get sub 30 any percent after like a couple hundred hours of like speedrunning. And that was basically my ultimate goal, and I was quite happy to achieve that. Like that felt very similar to doing like a normal Deathless challenge, because like overcoming such a massive goal, I guess, like final or achieving such a massive goal, that's like what can make speedrunning as enjoyable or as exciting as like completing or achieving a Deathless challenge, or whatever, Deathless challenge or something like that. And then I did also later go and do all collectibles Deathless, which I think to this day is still like my greatest achievement. That it's an hour and a half run where I basically did everything you can possibly do, collected everything you can possibly collect. In the overworld, I did Deathless everything in a row besides the game cartridges. No further plans, I don't think, to go and do max percent or 152% Deathless, because that would be like, in my opinion, one of the probably hardest, greatest gaming achievements of all time. But I don't think it would be. I just don't want to do that, because it's hard to. The problem with it is that no matter what, you have to do the cartridges really, really late in the run. Especially what I consider to be the hardest glitch cart, which makes it the hardest cart in the game, is the last thing you unlock. So you have to do the hardest like platforming in the game after like 2 hours into a run. Like, how are you even going to manage to do that? I don't know. It would be insane. But when you try and do more game content, Deathless or like No Hit or Perfect, the different categories and like extensions of like the game that you can add can make it like really silly for routing, and it can make it really silly for like how nerves impact you. Like with what I just said, like because of this one little like thing about the game is that in order to unlock the final cart, which is the hardest cart, you need to get all of the other collectibles first, which is insane, which makes it like that adds so much artificial difficulty to it. If you could do all of the segments in any order, it would make it so much easier, but you can't do that. That's an interesting thing with like long form runs, where it's like one little game mechanic or something can like make the run so much exponentially harder than like it might otherwise be, because you just like don't have control. Anyways, that's all I have to say about the NSI.
It's also a good place to move into Celeste as well, because in terms of hitless ordering, because you in Celeste you've completed the C-Sides back to back Deathless,
Yeah.
and that wasn't in chronological order. That was in your own order.
Yeah.
Could you describe how you set that order up? Was it hardest to easiest, easiest hardest, or in a particular way, Elder?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's roughly hardest to easiest, least consistent to most consistent, basically. Like I would change it up a little bit depending on like how I was feel. As I would change the first two pretty much exclusively only. I think I started with 8C and 5C. Those just have like the most awkward beginnings, in my opinion, that are just kind of hard to sandwich in like in the middle of a run. To just like knock out those inputs would be quite difficult. Could be done, but I'd have to be more consistent at it. So like you definitely want to pick the hardest stuff first and then go back from there, because then it just becomes about staying, like, it's not even about really precision anymore. It's just staying calm and staying focused and not getting too distracted, and you could probably do it. It is a decent amount harder if you do it in the main order, which I have gone back and done. Surprisingly a decent bit harder. Being able to select your own order is just like, is so nice for that type of thing.
We talked about this is sort of a tangent. Just we'll go back to the runs specifically, but we talked about input high level of inputs in Celeste, and as well as with the other games, of course. Like I say, a weird tangent, but have you ever had any like hand issues? Because it just reminds me of when I did like Farewell for the first time. I had to take a break from that final screen because I've been holding the jellyfish
Yeah.
for so long, and then some other stuff. So I was just wondering, because of like the high input levels of these runs that you do in Celeste, in End Is Nigh, and other stuff, if that's ever been a thing. You don't have to go into it if you don't want
Yeah,
to,
no,
but
no, yeah. I'm totally fine going into that. So, yeah, I know a lot of people have that, and weirdly, I've never had issues with my hands or like pain or like wrist, forearm. I've actually never had. I'll in Celeste, I did have a little bit of a thing that I'll get into in a second, but for the most part, I've been totally fine. And I do mash the heck out of my keyboard. I mean, now I also play Osumania. So I mean, like, I mash my key. That's where I mash my keyboard the most. But in speedrunning, the end is nigh. I mean, like, even that is basically like freaking playing Osumania. Like, you have to press so many buttons. In Celeste, yes, I did have a little bit of, it was my ring finger, only my ring finger that had problems, because so I do this thing where in Celeste I hold the grab button constantly. And if you've watched my videos or like looked at my input display in my videos, you probably would notice that my grab button is always held. That's just how I learned to play the game, because I started playing the game on controller actually, but when I was getting the golden strawberries, I would die because I would do a misinputted dash direction. I started off doing analog stick and then moved on to D-pad. But analog stick is like the worst with dash direction. It's really hard to get a diagonal for some reason. Like it just does not feel intuitive or right. And it's just hard to do quickly. Like to do quick series of dashes or something, and like, it's so easy to dash in the wrong direction on analog stick. D-pad, it was okay, it was better, but still like maybe like 2% of the time I would dash in the wrong direction, because I use the Xbox One D-pad. And what can happen is that you can be pressing, only up, down, left, right. But if you like put your pressure too much on one side of that, little rectangle, I guess, like sticking out, like if you put too much pressure on one corner, it can actually push the D-pad to make a diagonal input. Like you can, because the buttons aren't totally separate. So like if you push any of the buttons in like at a wrong angle, it'll accidentally input a diagonal, and there's really no way to tell if you're doing that or not. So it's like you have to have some amount of like finesse and like control of your thumb to like press exact locations. And like, dude, I just don't want to deal with that anymore. So eventually I switched to keyboard, and I found it very difficult to handle keyboard inputs. Like it felt like another universe, because I'm used to the end is nigh. It's literally one with my left hand. The only thing I'm pressing is jump. With my right hand, I'm doing left, right, fast fall. So like I'm not used to having 3 inputs on my left hand. That's like such a massive, because like jump and dash are basically like the main ones, and then there's grab. So what I thought is like, well, I mean, you never don't need, or it's hardly ever that you need to not be holding grab. Holding grab for the most part isn't gonna like kill you. It's gonna save you most of the time. So I just started holding grab constantly to simplify the game controls for myself when I was learning it. So it basically made it like I am only having to manage 2 buttons instead of 3 buttons with one hand. This is when I was going for Summit A Golden, actually, which makes sense because like Summit A Golden is like, besides Farewell, it's the longest run that you have to do, and the longer the run is, the higher chance you're gonna have of having a misinputted dash direction, because you're doing so many dashes. So it's like I just kept dying because of that. And I'm like, bro, I just need this to not happen. And I figured it wouldn't happen on keyboard. And it didn't. Like, it basically disappeared entirely. I never misinput my dash direction on keyboard. But yeah, it was just so awkward, like, having all of the buttons in a row. So, like, I would just constantly press the grab button. And as I re-100%ed the game just to get used to it. And I was mostly used to it by that point. So I went back to doing runs of Summit A Golden. And I would notice like only when I like finally released the pressure off of my ring finger, like because it was my left ring finger that was holding down. I use default controls. ZXC is are the or grab dash jump in that order. So I was holding down Z with my ring finger like constantly. And so after like I mean, and I would do sessions for like 3 hours or something, and I would like barely let go of grab the entire time. So I would let go of grab, and it felt like my like I like broke a bone in my finger. Like it hurt that bad, which was I mean not good. Not wouldn't recommend that. But I mean like there were times where it hurt so bad. So I'd have to like massage my finger, and it was like so it was so bad. I mean, I laugh now, but like I didn't. I don't think it was like I may be exaggerating it a little bit, but I mean, it was pretty bad pain. But it was only after I released it, and then after I gave it a rest for a little bit, I would continue playing. And basically, it would be after a while, I actually did not feel those pains anymore. I don't know if it's because I just like wore down the nerves or
I was
something.
gonna say no, then he's just
Like
just gave up.
yeah,
Said he's not
exactly.
taking the message.
Like, but my finger seems fine, I guess. I've literally had sessions of playing Celeste for like 12 hours, and I'm holding grab the whole time, and I will not have pain anymore. So that is, I don't know if my finger just got strong, or like I said, if the or like you said, if the nerve endings are just gone. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it, but I mean, other than that, like I've never had wrist problems. I've never had forearm, otherwise hand problems.
We talked a little bit earlier about nerves, and you brought up the golden room. uh, not to agree, but I watched the golden room, which is if you do the golden strawberry in farewell, there is a nice little extra level after you are normally finished, which is a great job from the developers. It's very much appreciated. But I like I'm watching a VOD. I'm not even watching live, and it's like titled completed. Like this is the video, and I was stressed like
Yeah.
watching it because there was like a couple of close
Mhm.
moments, and I was actually impressed that you like at one point you just said, okay, like aborted, like we're just gonna wait a sec,
Yeah.
take a moment, because I've not done that in certain occasions and lost a run because of it. So I thought that in those circumstances that was really impressive that you managed to take a sec, even with all
Yeah.
that.
So that's like one of the most embarrassing moments I've ever like captured on video. Like I can't watch that. Like I cringe so bad watching that. Oh god. Like, and I've rewatched it recently just cuz to give myself like exposure therapy or something, because like I hate remembering that. So yeah, I knew that the screen existed, but I never looked at it. I never practiced it, obviously. So I didn't know what to expect. So I had to sight read this screen. Luckily there's a bunch of watchtowers in the screen. But I mean, I have to map out exactly what I'm going to do. And you have to carry this jellyfish through, the entire screen. And I was trying to do this mechanic called Jellyvator, where it's sort of advanced, and I actually was not very good at it. Like for some reason I just found it difficult to do. But I mean, I was going for it anyways because like I thought I'm a good enough player, I should be able to do this. So I was like forcing myself to do it. And I guess the thing where in midair, if you hold down and then release grab, you drop the jellyfish midair, but you fall faster than the jellyfish falls. So you drop it midair and then you dash up and re-grab it, and you'll basically give yourself like this huge upward boost and re-grab the jellyfish. And I was trying to do that to skip some parts of the screen just to make it safer. It would be safer if I could consistently do that mechanic, which I was struggling to do. So I messed it up like over 10 times. And like there was one point where I almost made it to like a new checkpoint of the area basically, but I just barely did not make it on the platform. And I was like slowly descending on spikes that were like right, or I was descending towards spikes that were right there. I mean, I was only like a few frames from touching the spike and dying. And like after that, I was like, forget it, go back down. Just don't, just stop. Like, because I knew I was panicking too much. I mean, and I was forcing myself through panic as it was, but then I got so close to death that it just freaked me out. So I did mess up a little bit after that, but I did sort of recompose myself enough to get it done. But I mean, I'm so surprised I didn't die doing that.
I think some of your chat may have had heart attacks during this
Yeah,
because just reading it.
someone definitely had problem for sure. Like if I was watching that, I would have closed the stream probably. I don't think I could have watched that personally. I'm surprised anyone was sitting through that. That was awful. Like I so wish I practiced that instead. I wish there was not as bad as it was, but it's kind of iconic now.
There's just a quick point on the elevator thing. That one of the biggest benefits of that strat is that you don't chuck the jellyfish anywhere.
Yeah.
Because like normally when you release the jellyfish, you chuck it in the direction that you're facing.
Exactly.
Using that, it just keeps it in the same spot. It's so useful. It's still one I need to get better at, but it's gone. But it's so nice.
Yeah, because
Once you got it.
yeah, because if you mess up the regrab, so it is possible to obviously throw the jellyfish in front of you and then do a diagonal up dash and then regrab it. And the timing, I guess the timing is technically tighter, maybe, but I had not really done that technique too many times actually, because you don't really have to do that technique a whole lot. So I had mainly just forced myself to do the jelly evaders. But like I said, that is a good point, because if you throw it to the side and fail to regrab it, if that jellyfish is like on the very edge, there's a high chance it's falling all the way to the bottom, and like it's gonna be really hard to get again. So it is beneficial somewhat. I wasn't even thinking of that when I was doing it. I was just I don't even know what I was doing. But luckily I made it through, and then later on I redid to reclaim my pride. I did Farewell Golden plus Moonberry, which I call the Golden Moonberry run. And what I did,
Which I believe was the world's first, wasn't it?
it was,
Golden Strawberry
yeah,
and
it
Moonberry.
was. It was a few days after I got, or maybe only a couple days after I got normal Farewell Gold. I needed to reclaim some honor on that screen. So what I did, my idea was I was going to collect the Moonberry, go to the Golden screen, and then I wasn't going, like, playing through the entire Golden room. I was not going to collect the Moonberry. I was going to collect both the Moonberry and the Golden at the same time once I get to the Battle in Orb, which is a really weird like thing I just decided to do. But I'm like, I wanted to like I said, I wanted to like reclaim some honor. I mean, it wasn't even like, it was like subconsciously. That's kind of why I was doing it. But I just wanted to. The screen embarrassed me. I wanted to get the game back. So I did it. I got to the screen with the Moonberry, and I nailed it first try. Look, I mean, after a lot of practice, it's not very difficult. It's a pretty easy screen if you're able to practice it beforehand. But I mean, having to do it blind the first time is really stressful. But I was able to do that, and that was like one of my favorite moments in Celeste, because I also was like rated. I happened to have like a lot of viewers at the time. One of like Nero, who's like one of the top Celeste speedrunners released at the time, rated me during that run. So it's like it was really hype, and I was able to clutch it out. One of my favorite moments. And many people have actually gone and done the exact same thing since, have done the double collect, as it's called, getting the Golden and the Moonberry at the same time, which is really weird and strange that I was able to, like, my arbitrary thing that I decided to do sort of like influenced other people to then like go and do that exact thing. And it's like, whoa, I started like a thing. It's weird. I don't know.
It's also cool that the developers actually thought about that, because I watched the Moonberry Golden Strawberry, and it's like
Yes.
there's like a unique and as you mentioned in the video, there's a unique sound effect
Yeah.
for the Golden Strawberry, because there's a room on your way to the Moonberry which you thinks you have to die, which you do have to die, but the Golden Strawberry moves to the next spot instead of staying with you in order to let you do it, which was like pretty, like, the developers must have gone, well, there are people who are gonna do this, so let's
Yeah,
let's
no,
add
that's
something.
so neat to me that they added that. Like, because I actually didn't know if it was, well, people hinted strongly at me that it did work, but no one ever straight up told me that it did or it did not work. I don't believe. So yeah, there's the part where you have a forced death, but the Golden detaches from you, and when it like sets into place after detaching from you, it makes this beautiful, like, is it a gong? Is it a different gong sound? But it's a total unique sound effect that they made for that, and it's like, what? I can hardly believe that they actually like did that, like, because they could have just reused the sound effect, like, but they made a whole new thing just for that, where it's like only like a handful of people are ever going to experience that, like the attention to detail and like what, like how far they're willing to go for like those little things. I love the Celeste developers.
It's interesting because in most cases that'd be the end of story, just like, oh, golden strawberry, golden, like, moonberry, that hardest level, all the hardest stuff, deathless. that would be normally it. But there's some, what I've seen, even more impressive stuff in your modded runs, such as 7D and recently 71D, and just so many different kinds of modded runs. What was your first, like, was it after you'd done the Farewell Golden and you went, okay, I want like something more, or what was your first step into that modded area?
So I'm trying to remember exactly what I was doing. I did not immediately go into 70 golden or practicing. So I guess to briefly mention, the D-sides are like the most popular pack of mods, or like the most popular mods just like in general for Celeste. They're made by Monica, and they're basically like the spiritual successor to the ramping difficulty of the levels, like the B-side, the C-side, that developers left off. Obviously, now we're getting to ridiculous territory. There's not a D side on any cassette tape, but that's just like the name because it's the next letter, whatever. But like it, so they are the way that the difficulty direction went. The B sides are like slightly shorter than A sides, and they're harder, or maybe like same length, or just like a little bit shorter. The C sides are really short, 3 screens, but they contain like the most precise platforming, but those are the easiest to do Deathless because they're just so short. D sides are B side, if not A side length, and they're way harder than like even the C side content. So it's a very, very good like transition in my opinion. Okay, so I sort of remember. I don't remember how soon after I did, all my Farewell Golden stuff, but I did move on to the D sides, and I did 1D, 2D, and 3D, the old version at the time. I got all those golden strawberries. Now, when I did those, 1 and 2D had already been done. I don't remember by how many people. I think it was either 2D or 1D that had only been done by Monica at the time. So there was no other besides Monica herself. I know there was no other like person that had done it. Those were actually not super bad. 3D, however, on the cycle hell, the absolute worst. So much routing and planning and like having to like test so many different things. But like I like that because I'm a fan of breaking down levels and like trying a bunch of different stuff and like just theorizing. The feeling of like coming up with like a clever strat and then having it make something easy, like a decent amount easier, is just like that's what every like strat finder's dream is like simplifying things that were once really difficult. It's like that's all I find that process to be really, really satisfying. That's my favorite part of like practicing, is like finding the strats. Like I could do that in just about anything and not get bored probably.
So could you describe, because this is like, so I come from like more longer runs like with bosses like Hollow Knight and Sekiro and stuff like that, and doing the same thing, but for like the runs I would do, it's like a lot more noticeable. Like it'd be a boss that you find a cheese for, that is like a really simplified way of, you don't have to deal with it, or you can do a ton of damage or something like that. For a platformer like Celeste, it might be a little more tricky to like find like a cheese or an easy way. So could you provide an example of like where, I know it's gonna be hard to like visualize, but like where you found a way to avoid a difficult section, or what common ways you found
Yeah,
doing that kind of
so
thing?
I might be able to find a specific example, but I can talk just generally because I think I pretty much have this. So you have to work with what you know are consistent mechanics of the game. Doing full jumps, obviously full jumps grant you the exact same height every single time. You want to do stuff with full jumps as much as possible because that's going to give you, for free, the most consistent result. And then another important aspect of platformers that's usually present is buffer jumping, which is when a few frames before you land, or however big the leniency window the developer decides to make it, but usually a few frames, if you press jump before you land, and you hold it, you will jump first frame upon landing, which provides you with another consistent result. So doing buffered full jumps in most games is like, in most platforming games, are going to be a pretty good way of having a consistent strat that like avoids obstacles. So it's like holding a single direction and then doing like buffered full jumps from like a specific starting position. Like what you need is a consistent starting position, and then like a consistent way of moving from said starting position, and then finding some way to do like buffered inputs or like holding one button the whole time. to subvert something. That is the easiest like form of cheese that could be had. And for most really complex things, you're not going to find a strat that's that easy. I mean, maybe for like a small part, but it's never like you're never going to find something like that for like that skips like anything super significant usually. But sometimes, very in rare cases, you'll like, there's like this really hard part, but then you can just totally trivialize it, which that is the greatest, because that's like, but then it's weird because it's like, well, this one part made this one challenge like way harder, but then now that it's trivial, now it's like the whole difficulty of this challenge has changed, because now this is like, that's a weird thing. But yeah, so like, you have to find the consistent elements of the game. Now in Celeste, it's really easy to, climb to the same position. Like the pixels are very big, like the on-screen pixels are very big in Celeste. I know there are subpixels, but most stuff isn't like subpixel dependent. So like you can climb to any pixel you want, or you can like get in a corner or like something. If you do a dash without holding direction, that gives you a consistent set distance. So like there's so many different ways in Celeste that I can't even name them all, and I'm not even gonna try. Like there's so many different ways to garner consistent results in very different ways, or slightly different ways. Like there's just so many things you can do with Celeste that like finding a setup is almost inevitable. But other than that, next best thing you have are like visual cues or audio cues. I tend to go with visual cues because I don't even know how to, I don't know, for some reason audio cues are just like way more difficult for me, and most games don't really lend themselves to that very well. Then yeah, I don't know what the level down from that is, just like winging it. But there's just so many instances. I struggle to find like a really great example that's like easy to explain. But basically, like with dash distances being the exact same every time, with buffer jumping existing, and like, corners, as silly as it sounds, corners existing, just ways to get consistent position, ways to get consistent changes in position. That is how you like simplify platformers.
How do you approach like a new run? So, most recent video that I've seen on the channel was one that was titled 71D, which looks like hell itself. But if you like have opened that up, or if you've looked at one more recently, you've opened that up, you've admired the work that's been put into it. How do you approach it? Do you just do playthroughs and learn as you go, or is there a specific approach you take now, or if that's changed since you've done more of these runs now?
Yeah, so I think it's like somewhat slightly changed, but not a whole lot. So I mean, I'll do like my playthrough and maybe a couple playthroughs, but then I immediately go into strat find mode, and I from my base knowledge, from the knowledge level and familiarity that I have with the map at that point, I just go and I test so many different things per level, per section of the level, to try and find the easiest way. Because I mean, I have a lot of experience in the game, generally speaking, at this point. So I will try. There's so many tools in my tool belt to like so many different like types of things that I could try to make things easier. And usually I can sort of tell like what could be a way of simplifying this part of it. So like I have a bunch of ideas, endless ideas. And I just keep going until I find something that I'm satisfied with on a single part of a single level. Then I move on to the next part of that level. Then I get past that level, and then I do the whole section, and then eventually it's the whole chapter. The thing is, though, that process takes me so long usually that by the time I'm done, I'll have somewhat forgotten what I even did like at the very beginning of the chapter. And that's kind of the situation I'm in right now, where it's like I've almost 150 hours spent in 71 dash. And all I've done is all of the checkpoints deathless, which I can't say all I've done, but that is pretty significant. But I mean, for reference, normal 7D, I was done by this point. It only took me like 129 or something like that hours to go from 0 to done with 70, like, so it's just normal 7D golden.
This preparatory work, do you do on stream or off stream or a mix?
Yeah, mostly I actually do it on stream, but I guess it's a somewhat mix. I tend to like just documenting what I do. Like I'm not a streamer to be a streamer, I want to say, necessarily. I mean, even though I do find the aspects of streaming to be fun, and I do enjoy doing it, but I feel like that's not why actually that I started my Twitch channel. I started my Twitch channel to document and like have evidence for, No Hit Sans 1.5 speed actually, initially. But all I wanted is just for like proof of like that I wasn't cheating. Yeah, for proof of legitimacy. And like I've added things over the years to like my overlay or whatever, make it even more credible. Like I've added the input display. I like having my keyboard sounds audible because it, like having that match up with the input display and what's happening on screen, it makes it like totally irrefutable. Like there's no way you could argue that it's not actually happening. I mean, like at this point, I feel like yeah, I have like proven myself. Like, do I have to do these things? No, but I just sort of like doing them now. I like having the input display. I like having audible key clacks. It's just nice things. What was I talking about originally?
Saying how you would approach like a new modded
Oh, right,
level.
right, right. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just go section by section, like strat finding, and then it takes me so long that I have to basically do it again immediately afterwards, but this time faster. And then, so yeah, I go through round one. I always say that, like, I go through my round one of like strat finding, and then I go for round two. I don't think round two is totally necessary most of the time. Like, and sometimes I just don't even do a round two, but it's good to be thorough like that to like really cement like it in your minds, because like the biggest challenge and overwhelming thing for me at first is like, oh my god, I have to memorize all of this crap. I can't imagine, that seems like so hard at first, but once it's done, it's done. Like if you play consistently afterwards, you're never gonna forget. So you only have to do it once, and so it's like, and once you get past that part, it does become a lot easier to grind out, in my opinion. So then after I do the whole strat finding work, I will do each, I'll section it off in some arbitrary way or like some obvious way to segment. Like in Celeste, there's checkpoints that are set, so that makes it pretty easy. I just do like each checkpoint deathless, and after I've strat found, I mean, usually it's not going to be a big challenge to do each checkpoint, except in 71 dash or 71D. The problem is that 3,000 meters, which is the final checkpoint, makes up basically a third, if not more, of the entire chapter. So that took a disproportionate amount of time to do deathless because it was just such a long. Like every other segment was like a minute and a half, maybe 2.5 minutes, and then this one thing is like 9 minutes
Oh,
of
damn.
like, and it's like the hardest platforming of the entire chapter, basically. Eventually, like was mentioned, I did. That is my most recent thing I've accomplished. Right now, I am working on doing 71D. I did all the checkpoints deathless, and then basically just do it again. This is where like freestyling it sort of comes in, because it doesn't really matter what you're doing. The real goal for me is to just like have it not be boring. So like I want to be playing and practicing something, but I mean I really want to have it just not be boring. Like I don't want to be like, I'll do like 5 full playthroughs through it. Like that I like, and that's the only like objective I have in mind. I don't think that's like a great thing. Well, first of all, because just doing full runs through over and over again indefinitely is just a great way to waste your time and not get very consistent in anything. Like how doing save state practice, practicing specific stuff that you recognize you're not as good at is important. And it's important to have the skill of recognizing like what are actually the problem areas of consistency in the run. Like I guess that's the only like skill that you really develop over time.
Yeah, I think that's a really key one, especially with any sort of run or routine, because especially in like early game, if you're doing full length runs, that is, even full level runs. In this example, having those key focuses at the start of going, okay, I die to this boss or this level or this piece of platforming consistently, having that, like, even just noting that down and saying, okay, this is the part I need to focus on for an amount of time to get consistent at that, and then it's going to feel so much better getting further in the run each time after that, knowing that that part is now a consistent part and not a point of concern.
Yes.
Just clears the mind kind of thing.
Exactly. Like that is the thing that I see people doing the least, I feel like. I've always been a very conscious gamer. Like when I make a mistake or like, I mess up in some way, I always like take note of, okay, what exactly, or I try to take note of what exactly happened there. Like why exactly did I mess up? Sometimes it's a psychological reason, sometimes it's a mechanic. Most of the time it's like a mechanical reason. Like I just like, did thing too early or too late. Like I thought of it like, or I can't even think of an example of like the psychological reasons. But I mean, there's so many factors, but like I usually can pin it down about like what messed up, and I just note it down like every time. Like I'm hyper aware of like why I'm making the mistakes I'm making. And the thing is though, like for a lot of those things, you can't really prevent them entirely. Some things it's literally like, okay, it's a tight timing I pressed the button too early. It's like a, you know, a 2-frame window. I mean, can you really, like, being aware of that doesn't really help you at all. And in fact, can in some cases harm you because like you'll start getting in the habit of pressing earlier than you think you have to, and then messing it up even more. And then you have to try and compensate. This is where it goes, like, it gets kind of, I don't even know what to call this problem. I mean, this happens a lot with every timing that like is difficult.
I think it's just like human error. Like that is a factor at the end of the day. Like there is going to be cases where you're just going to press
Yeah.
the button wrong, and like you can think about it and you can try and time it better, but sometimes it can be just that was the wrong press and just
Yeah.
just made a bee of it. But it's hard to it's definitely hard to accept that. I just
But,
blame
like,
the controller.
I wouldn't see, the thing is, I've always been a player that like I just blame myself rather than the game always, like, or something. Like I can't imagine. It's very rare that I will like blame the game.
Oh, I joke. I always I like if like you it's the stuff that you do you can control, even if it's a mechanical problem. That is the setup you've got,
Yeah,
and you have to sort of deal
right.
with. If you could describe the first that comes to mind, if I said most hyped moment on your stream from all these runs that you've done, most hyped moment, which would be the first one that would come to mind?
It'd have to be all collectibles Deathless in the End Is Nigh. Um, because something I didn't mention about that is that that was like the biggest fluke of my entire life doing that run. Because so I practiced for like, I wasn't counting the hours, but I definitely practiced for like well over 100 hours of just preparation. I had not even started attempts. I had done only a few full runs. And like I had a 3 death PB for a very long time, but then I took a long break from it. Then I returned to it, and then after a couple weeks of practice and then relearning, I was eventually able to get a 2 death PB. Then the next day I booted up the stream. I did a little practice on the last chapter, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do a run through that first attempt of the stream. Oh, and to add further context, I'd never done either half of the run Deathless before. Like I had only done the 2 death run, and I died in each of the deaths was in the past or the future. Like it was separated. So I hadn't done either section Deathless. Yeah, it was really surreal. I made it through the pass, which is the first half, as I mentioned, and I was like really excited to like just do that. Like I was already celebrating. Like once I made it, past the first half, I'm like, dude, like this is the beginning of the grinds, like is what I thought, and like I can actually make it here. And then the real hard part of the game comes. So it's like, and I literally said like 5 seconds into making it into the second half, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna die really fast. I'm gonna die so soon, but I just don't care because I'm so happy that I made it here. The thing is though, it's really easy though. Like after making it past like a PB point in a run that like, was there for a really long time, you're like almost relaxed for a decent amount of time after that. Like it's easy to play when you're on a PB, I want to say. Or in certain cases, it's easier. Like you're not as stressed out when you're on a PB run. So it's like whether like it's a win no matter what, wherever I die, basically. I mean, maybe unless I was like 5 seconds from the end, I would not consider that a win. But anything other than that is basically a win. So it's like it's having a situation like that is a very rare opportunity that like if you that you can take great advantage of, but not really by your own will. Anyways, so I was not really that stressed out actually. And it turns out I did not die within like 10 seconds. I played through and I made it all the way to the final area. I just could not even believe what was happening. Like I started to get really, really nervous like towards the end because I'm like, oh my God, wait a second. Because if I mess up now, like the final chapter, like if you mess up at that point, it's like the amount of time. Because I'm obviously fluking like so crazy right now. It would take so long for me to reach that point again. Like imagine, because it's a 1.5 hour run already. So I mean, like an attempt. I mean, the soonest I could get back is 1.5 hours. But it's actually gonna take dozens of attempts, most likely 50 plus hours I would have had to spend 100%. There's no way I would have done any sooner than that. But I was able to actually clutch it out at the end, and I freaked out as I often do. I was so hyped, and everyone was like, what just happened? Like, how did that even? That is definitely my most underrated thing as well. I would say that 7D Golden has gotten the recognition that I feel like it deserves. It's my most viewed video on my channel, has like 100 something thousand views. Like, I'm pretty happy with that. But one day I would like a video with 1 million views. Like, I would like to do something great enough to like to break that barrier, but we'll see.
I will say that that 7D, I think a big aspect was the thumbnail. That is, I think the thumbnail's really good. From the
Yeah, most
clickability.
of the time I have a pretty half-assed thumbnail, but
Yeah, that one was super good.
that that was really the thing. I've like not made any of my thumbnails. Some person in the Celeste Discord just like posted that image, and I was like, oh my god, can I use this please? And they're like, yeah. I was so happy because I'm like, it was perfect. I knew as soon as I got the thumbnail, I'm like, ooh my goodness.
Last thing I want to ask was, what's in the future plans of Eenox?
I think I want to do 71 dash golden strawberry. That's what I'm working on currently. I'm redoing all of the checkpoints Deathless. Besides 3,000 meters, I don't think I'm gonna redo Deathless again. Um, but I've spent so much time on it, like I said, almost 150 hours on it, that I've been really slow going on it. I've stopped to do Jump King challenges. I knew Jump King custom map came out, and it took me over 50 hours to beat, and I have 370 something hours in the game. So there's that. Like, yeah, I've gotten sidetracked by actually 2 Jump King custom maps. In the middle of this grind, I've been really slow going on it. I really want to pick up the pace and like start to really get to work on like, I want this to be my new hardest that I've completed, but it's probably going to take like 500 hours or something, or like at least a few hundred. But the thing is, like with other games and other like no hit runs and stuff, like that's like baby time. Because with like Dark Souls or like Soulsborne and Sekiro and like all those games, which are like I would say like the main front for no hit runs and stuff, those are like all long, super long form, and as a result, and especially when you combine the games, like those are super long form, and the time just gets eaten up so quickly, I imagine, where it is not quite the case with mine, because like 100 hours in like a Dark Souls game is like, I feel like probably not a whole lot to most people. I have no reference though.
It's always gonna be a ton into it, but it's also weird in the aspect of the percentage of focus time. Like with platforming, it's almost next to 100% of the time of those 150 hours, 100 hours, etc., is
Yeah,
active work. Whilst in something like Dark Souls, in that 100 hours, 50 hours of them might be dangerous, but the other 50 hours is just leveling up, easy running sections, such like
gotcha.
so. There's also, I think, that difference to it
Yeah,
as
I mean,
well.
yeah, there's a lot of filler time, I imagine, but still, the important moments, the time has elapsed. And that's really, when it comes to nerves, I feel like that's all that really matters, is the time that you're like gambling away. Like makes the like when you're actually in those intense moments, I can only imagine like the pressure like that you feel. Yeah, like that's gotta be crazy. Other future plans, I wanted to do, it's gonna sound insane. I wanted to do no hit Pantheon 5 all bindings. I've never
Ooh, very
done
nice.
Pantheon 5 all bindings at all, and I've never done obviously Pantheon 5 with or no hit like regular ever. I started practicing sort of for that. I used the all bindings mod, and I just did all of the bosses in Hall of Gods. I actually did not do all of them. I did like 90%, but then like the Pantheon bosses, when I was doing the Nail Brothers, it wasn't that it was too hard. Like I got through the collector, which most people said was like one of the hardest bosses or one of the most annoying to do with
Yeah,
all binds.
Collector and Grey Prince Zote's also very
Yes.
tricky with
I
all
think I
bindings.
did both of those. And then I went on to like the Nail Brothers. I forget what they're called.
Oromato, yeah.
Got it. And in the middle of it, I was like, guys, I literally I cannot stomach to learn a single other strat. I just can't do it. I was like, bro, I'm so bored with this. I just cannot. And that's what I've heard. It's that it's like really a boring thing to do.
Yeah, Son no, he's doing all bindings, no hits on PB of one at the minute, which is incredible. But I've currently been trying to work on just regular hitless, and the fast pace of it makes it interesting, be able to keep to doing like tons of attempts. But the old bindings, I couldn't add that to it. It just makes it last so long. It's such a like focus that I just don't have. Like to keep that up underneath the bosses
Right.
takes so long. Separate, all good, but together couldn't beat it.
Yeah, that is something I would like to maybe return to in the future. But I mean, mainly I'm just waiting for Silksong to come out. No secret. I've
Yeah.
literally been saying this for, I mean, like when I was doing all collectibles Deathless practice, which was in what was that, like May of 2020. I thought that the game was on the horizon at that point, and I mean, like, where are we now?
2022, Colin, knocking on the door.
And it's just not. So I feel like there's a great chance the game will come out next year. Now, when next year? I mean, people were thinking it might be like February-ish. I'm not gonna hold out those high hopes, but if and when the game comes out, I don't even care. I'm dropping anything. I don't care what I'm in the middle of. It doesn't matter. I could be on a one death. I could have a one death PB. I could have I could be so close to doing 71D gold. I don't care. Like, Silksong is what's going to take my entire attention, because like I wish Hollow Knight is a big regret of mine that I did not hop on sooner, because it's my favorite game. I want to say, just I'm not even like a combat like platformer type of guy. Well, it's not a combat platformer, like, but I like platformers. And it's like that, and it has nice movement, but the main focus is combat, which is why it's really different to me, and why I don't think I like the skills that I have don't exactly fit the skills that Hollow Knight asked for. I think I would be like okay, like I have related skills that would accelerate my progress probably, but it would ultimately be quite a hurdle to overcome to like get really good at Hollow Knight. So so instead of like, going to Hollow Knight now, especially because like, the best players have put thousands of hours in, and that's generally what I want to do when I play a new game, is like when I find a game I really love, I want to be one of the best players for it. That's just like, that's always like my thing. Like, I want to be a top player in some respect. Like, obviously there's no best player, but like in some specification I would like to be a top player of some kind.
And with something like a fresh game, it's like everyone's got the same start line,
exactly
kind of thing.
Like, I don't think anyone who's played Hollow Knight for 6,000 hours or something would have, even those people I don't think would have a super big advantage like going into Silksong, more than just like they know how to practice a boss. I don't really know how to like practicing boss. I mean, it's probably not too different. Like, I could probably figure it out, but I mean, when it comes to like practicing boss fights, and like I'm just not as familiar with mechanics in Hollow Knight, and just like, fighting games or just combat games in general, as for like what are general methods or strategies. So that would be the thing that I would have to catch up on. But I think you're more or less all going to be on the same level. So I'm like, and I just know Silksong is one of the most anticipated games. Like, probably going to be like one of the most anticipated games in the next like coming decades, literally, that overlap with the genres of games that I'm actually interested in. Like, it's such a monumental occasion, I feel like, in my gaming career, like this game coming out. So I cannot overstate how excited I am for Silksong to come out, and like I'm so ready for competition, and so ready to fight to be a top player in that one.
Yeah, if it comes out next year, it's going to be just absolutely madness. Because at the time of recording, the Game Awards is approaching. They've just released the nominees, and like the anticipated games category is like God of War, Ragnarok, Legend of Zelda sequel, Elden Ring, a couple of things I forget, but equally as huge. And then Silksong potentially on top of that. It's just going to be an potentially an absolute. Well, it's going to be an absolute mad year as well. But add Silksong on as well, it's gonna like, I don't know how we're gonna find the time.
I know, but it's gonna be like years of content for me. Silksong coming out. Oh God. But I'll keep keep myself busy until then.
If people wanted to check you out, find out, watch the runs, where they'll be looking.
Oh, so youtube.com/Eenox, or mainly twitch.tv/Eenox. I stream on Twitch. I don't have a schedule, but I mean, I've been streaming like almost every day, like 5 times a week, doing my whatever thing I'm doing. And like I said, I mainly stream not to be like a streamer, but to like just share what I'm doing, and like share the grinding process, because it's not all nice and it's not all exciting most of the time. So, but I'm just sharing what I'm doing.
Well, Eenox, I really appreciate the time, especially as gone over what's estimated, but I appreciate it and hope you've enjoyed, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation today.
Yeah, me too. No, it did not feel. I see the recording. It's been 2 hours and 18 minutes. It does not feel like it's been that long, but yeah, I enjoy talking about this stuff anytime.
No worries at all. And I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it as well, and hope everyone has a great rest of the day. I'll catch you in the next episode. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more of amazing guests, be sure to head over to youtube.com/WayOfLoci, Loki spelled with a C, or WayOfLoci.com/NoHitPodcast.